Welcome to the Land Use Committee for December 9th, 2020. And we have one item on our agenda. It's Ordinance 2028 to rezone 7.22 acres of property from planned unit development to mixed-use student housing in regard to 301 East Brownstone Drive, known as Brownstone Terrace Apartments. And I think we have from the Planning and Transportation Department, Eric Grolich is up to speak.
Yes, I'm ready. Are you ready for me to get going?
Yes, go ahead,
Okay.
please.
Sounds great. Give me just a second. Where's my... Sorry, for some reason my PowerPoint is not showing up in my list of things to share. Oh, there it is. Okay, yeah, sorry, I apologize about that.
No problem.
Okay, yes, as you mentioned, this is a request from the standard at Bloomington for a property at 301 East Brownstone Drive. The property is currently zoned as a planned unit development and has been developed with high-density multifamily residential apartment complex. This site was zoned as a planned unit development in the mid-90s, late 80s. For exactly this use, it was a one-use PUD for multifamily apartments. It was approved somewhere upwards of 15 units an acre. It was developed with 2 3-story buildings. The buildings have kind of outlived their useful life, and the petitioners would like to redevelop the site with a new student-oriented development. So they are requesting to vacate the PUD and rezone this to the new mixed-use student housing district. So to the north of this are a mix of uses. You've got a single-family neighborhood as well as the Terra Trace apartments to the north. To the east of this, you have a Duke substation, as well as some other multifamily residences. To the south of this, you have a railroad line, and then a mix of single and multifamily residences on the other side of the railroad in the old northeast neighborhood. And then to the west of this, you have a mix of commercial and mixed-use land uses. So the site has approximately 700 feet of frontage along 14th Street, about 200, 150 feet or so along Dunn Street to the east. The internal road that is on the site now is a private drive. And so the petitioners would be removing all of the existing buildings to make way for a new student-oriented development. So with this request, they are simply requesting a rezone of the site to the mixed-use student housing district that's currently in the zoning code. The Planning Commission heard this petition and only reviewed the request to rezone the property. So there was not a site plan approval that went along with this request. Obviously, they have to rezone the property first before they can design it to any of those standards. So the first step here is to go forward with the rezoning approval and then come back later with a site plan approval. So they have given us a conceptual site plan just to kind of show how the site would be laid out. So we did look at that just kind of conceptually and verified that it looked like it would be possible to meet the UDO standards. We did not do a full in-depth site plan analysis as we just didn't have all those details. But they have shown us some of the concepts of how the site would be designed. So as I mentioned, it would be designed to meet all of the standards of the mixed-use student housing district. This includes setbacks, height, impervious surface coverage, parking, etc. So the site has a kind of a significant amount of grade change as you move from east to west across the site. It's about 50 feet of road elevation change. So the building design has been shown as kind of a staggered height. That kind of drops down from 1 and 2 stories on the west end of the site, as you see here, to 5 and kind of 6 stories along the east end of the site. So they have submitted a massing model of the overall site, kind of showing some of the the existing buildings that surround this. On the foreground here, you can see the Terra Trace apartments. These are 2- and 3-story buildings. And then further in the background of this, you can see the Old Northeast neighborhood and then the downtown and kind of the far reaches of the background here. So with this request, obviously one of the things that we review is the comprehensive plan. That is a major component to any rezoning petition. The comprehensive plan gave a lot of guidance for student housing and where that should be located. There were many areas that encouraged the student housing district and housing for students to be located out of the downtown. Certainly, as the Land Use Committee and the Council is aware, we've seen a great influx of student housing oriented development within the downtown within the past 10 and 15 years. And while that's certainly been very beneficial to maintaining and promoting a vibrant downtown, there was a lot of concern about how that use had been specifically located in the downtown. And we were encouraged to look for other areas close to campus where that type of housing could be instituted. The Gateway North area was one of those areas. So the Gateway North area kind of expands from the bypass south and encompasses from College Street to the west, to Dunn Street to the east, and then down to 17th Street and areas further to the south. So certainly, as the council has probably had an opportunity to look at the proposed draft zoning map, we've proposed that the areas south of the bypass down to this site could be potential candidates for the mixed-use student housing district. That was based on a variety of factors. One, certainly the location close to campus. The IU campus is a very broad area. Certainly the buildings expand from 3rd Street all the way to the southeast corner of the campus on Jordan, all the way up to the Memorial Stadium on Dunn and the bypass. We've certainly looked at with the Evolve project and the Motel 6 redevelopment project, how the housing in this particular area has been predominantly student oriented, and its location next to the bus stop for IU at the Memorial Stadium provides an ideal location. Again, also with this location as well, the units that are on the property now are certainly, while they're not exclusively for students, has predominantly been used for student housing. Certainly, same thing with Terra Trace, just to the north of this. So the comprehensive plan encouraged us to look at areas outside the downtown. The Gateway North area was one of the areas that was specifically highlighted that could be an ideal location for that use. And so that was one of the many reasons that the Plan Commission reviewed this petition and recommended forwarding this to you with a positive recommendation. So with this is along a bus route. There will be some changes to the bus route as part of some of the improvements that Bloomington Transit is looking at doing. But this will be adjacent to those routes as well. And the petitioner would be working with them if there was going to be any kind of bus station along this property. Certainly that's something that we'll review a little bit closer with the site plan. So I just wanted to kind of briefly point that out. So the Plan Commission did review this at their October meeting, I believe, and recommended 9-0 to forward this to you with a favorable recommendation. And just the one condition that deals with Bloomington Transit. Although the petitioners are not proposing any kind of a private shuttle, we just wanted to make sure that if they did propose a private shuttle at any time in the future, that be coordinated with Bloomington Transit and that no private shuttle service was allowed for this site. So that condition was kind of in line with some of the recent approvals that the council and the land use committee has heard regarding the incorporation of private shuttles. So this condition is not a requirement that they have to fund a route, but just that they are not allowed to use their own private shuttle. But if they do, they need to coordinate with Bloomington Transit. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions, and I believe the petitioner has a presentation as well.
All right, thank you, Mr. Garlick. Let's move on to the petitioner. And who would like to give a presentation on behalf of the petitioner?
I'm going to be speaking, and Kendall, if you could, there we go. All right, so I guess first and foremost, I just wanted to take a moment to thank everyone, all these members of City Council and the public for appearing here today. My name is Aaron Stang. I represent the owner and the developer of this project, Landmark Properties. Landmark's a vertically integrated real estate company, development, general contractor, and property management divisions. We invest our own cash and we manage to build our properties. As a company, our strategy is to develop multifamily projects adjacent to major universities, whereby we cater the design and function of our buildings to attract student renters. Our projects have several advantages for the communities in which we develop. These include relocating student renters out of traditionally single-family homes, which tends to improve relations with local residents, and by providing significant tax contributions via the redevelopment of often underutilized or blighted sites. Next page, please. Landmark is the largest student housing developer in the United States and presently has in excess of 9,500 beds under construction across the country. Past and current projects nearest to Bloomington include Urbana, Illinois, Louisville, Kentucky, and Ann Arbor, Michigan. Our development projects typically include 24-hour on-site management and substantial study and leisure space catered to our residents. When we began studying the site, we took note of the comp plan policy that Eric previously touched on in his presentation. This project is not in the downtown area, includes diverse housing with a substantial affordable and workforce component. It is near existing public transit and adjacent to campus with better walkability to both academic cores as well as the downtown area when compared to other student-oriented properties in Bloomington. The next few slides, which we'll slowly flip through, will provide a small sample of some of the projects we recently developed and can give you some context for what we're trying to do here.
All right, you ready for me, Aaron?
Yep, thank you very much, sir.
Well, I'm Kendall Kanoki with Smith Design Group. We're the local civil engineer on the project. And I just wanted to talk about a few civil related items in relation to this project. So there's been a lot of feasibility preliminary coordination that's gone on with the city. And this slide here is just highlighting some sanitary sewer upgrades and some water main improvements that'll need to be made as part of this project for the city to provide utility service. So what's shown on the screen here is what the developer has committed to upgrade in terms of utilities for this project. This slide here, I know there were some questions about bus service and just transportation in general. So this is trying to kind of compile the public transportation information that we have. What's shown in red is the primary pedestrian routes as we envision them, of people walking from the residences to campus area. And then I have the bus routes shown on here, including the campus shuttle routes. And this is what has been, all the information that's been given to me from Bloomington Transit as to what will happen once the shift occurs, the changes with the routes that's proposed. It was going to be January 1, 2021. COVID has kind of pushed that back again. But as far as I know, this is the latest and greatest information from Bloomington Transit that we have at this time. So our nearest transit stops will be on Walnut and College, as shown by these yellow dots here. And then the campus shuttle stops are shown in front of Luddy Hall. Those are the closest campus shuttle stops. And then this slide here, just wanted to show a little bit of the context. One thing we were asked by the city planning department to do and provide to them was a pedestrian easement through the site that's in line with Grant Street. So on this slide here, you can see we perfectly able to provide that. I think it's for a future potential bicycle corridor the city has planned. And just the site plan here, we have, checked everything on our end, and we believe that we can 100% meet zoning code with what's shown here on the plan currently for the MS zoning district. So with that, I will hand it off to Jack, who's going to talk a little bit about the architecture related items.
Good evening. My name is Jack Foreman, and I am the design partner for this project. It's a very exciting opportunity, and we're pleased to be able to work with staff and the neighborhood groups and now with yourself to implement this project. We started the project by visiting the site, looking at the commercial area up on Walnut, the residential area on Lincoln and Grant and Dunn Street, and then across the tracks, the single family homes, so that we could really have a feeling for how this project was going to be viewed from all of our surrounding neighbors. We also looked at the general context of this part of the city, the street grid, the topography, the drop of about 50 feet from Dunn down to just about Walnut. So it's a great site. It's a great opportunity. We look at this project as an opportunity to do a series of buildings that fit within the overall grid framework of the community, and to do something that will fit in well and be a timeless and exciting addition to the community. As you look at the basic site plan, if you could go to the next slide. Yes, there, thank you. This illustrates, and it was mentioned earlier, how we sort of position the different buildings. There's a series of internal courtyards in the two buildings, north and south. And then in the center building, we're screening the parking is located in the center of the building, and we're screening that from all of the neighborhood views. And so the views and the buffering on the south from those neighborhoods, we've taken pictures down each of the streets to kind of get a feel for all of that. We've also viewed the walk along 14th Street as a major opportunity to create an active, a vibrant, pedestrian, residential scale and character, and at the same time develop a series of buildings in a composition where each building is a little bit different architecturally, more like three sisters. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Okay. This illustrates at the corner of Dunn and 14th. You've got the transformer center to the left, and this illustrates the upper hill aspect of the project, 4 stories. The basic architectural treatment is to have a very active glass-oriented streetscape. The streetscape base of the building is all brick. And then we have 3 different materials as we go up on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floors here, where we have areas of brick up to the 4th floor. And then we have a random pattern of different materials of cement fiberboard in different colors to create a nicely articulated building that has a very strong streetscape scale, and then has a upper top floor termination, chamfered off the corner to create a nice entry to reinforce this open space at the corner of 14th and Dunn. Next slide, please. This illustrates the topography along 14th, where we have approximately the 50-foot drop. So the building is 4-story at Dunn, and then as it goes down the hill, the intermediate building is 4-story on one end, 5-story and a half on the other end, and then the building then steps down 2 full floors as we get to building 1, and then it steps down to 1 story at the fitness and aquatics area at the end of the building. As you can see, the open gaps that reflect the street grid separating the 3 building masses, we do connect them with glass skyways that are at approximately the 2nd floor above the streetscape. And then that allows us to connect all 3 buildings, but it's far enough back so that it doesn't create a continuous building facade. We've also got landscape buffers back on the railroad track side. As you can see, the parking in the middle with the units screening it, so that we're really providing a residential view from all sides. All of the courtyards are enclosed so that the activities and the overall acoustics of the courtyards are totally internal and don't export any noise to our neighbors. Next slide, please. This is taking a walk down 14th. As you look at the bottom slide, you'll see that we have activated residential entries to the units as you go down the street, much like townhouses, much like brownstone walk-ups, where we have terraced entries and then the brick at the ground floor, and then incrementally we have vertical brick that modulates the building into a series of segments so that it replicates kind of a row house kind of feeling. On this side, we have a few balconies interspersed along the facade to give it, again, a strong residential character. The upper slide shows the point of the main entrance for the leasing and office area. Also, this is, and I point out, if you look just above that skyway, this is the only point that you can see any of the parking ramp. And if you look on top of the building to the left, you'll see the screening that we've done to be very careful to screen all of our mechanicals. This also illustrates how we have 3 different brick colors. We have brown is the first building at Dunn. The middle building is terracotta red. And then the third building 1, which is the building to the right, has a buff colored brick. And then the buff colored brick is continuous. The colors of the cement fiber boards change between the 3 buildings, dark, light, dark, so that we're creating articulation and interest. There's a little plaza space here at the middle of the building at the entry area. You can see the landscaping and the way that it adds to the character of the walk down 14th. Next slide, please. This is at the bottom of the hill, and this is the terraced area around the outdoor pool and aquatics area, which is actually depressed below the streetscape. And with the landscape walls and the elevation of the outdoor pool deck, it's really not visible from the street. It provides privacy and acoustical separation. And you can see the story and a half amenity space that is the base of the main building with the 4 levels of housing above. Next slide, please. This is just an overall view of how we've sort of nestled the 3 buildings into the site. This is a large project. We recognize that right from the get-go, and we want to make sure that we articulate it and subdivide the buildings into similar pieces so that they work together as a grouping, but they're also sensitive to scale. As you can see, the modulation of the various buildings, we felt very good about how the brick creates a rhythm, much like row houses and residential articulation and typology. The same articulation goes in through the dividers so that it looks like you're walking down a street just like any street in this neighborhood where you're picking up the same kind of feel as you have on 14th. Next slide, please. Questions? Thank you.
Thank you. And was it Mr. Corman or Foreman?
Borman, B-O-A-R-M-A-N.
Foreman, got it.
Yes, graduate of Decatur High School in Indianapolis.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Borman.
You're welcome.
If Kendall, if you could unshare, there we go. All right, we are now ready for questions from committee members to either Mr. Groylik or members of the petitioners team. Do we have questions? Don't everybody jump up at once. Yes, Councilmember Flaherty.
Sure, I can get in there first. Thanks. Thank you, everyone, staff and petitioner for the presentations. I had asked a question in the questions we submitted in advance of this meeting that are also available in a packet addendum that's on the council's website for anyone watching along. I was just asking about building longevity and trying to get a better understanding of the nature of the current Brownstone Terrace development, which isn't super old, built in 1985, so 35 years. And I appreciate the detailed answer about some of the costs associated with keeping that development up to date. I also appreciate the answer that I asked about the longevity or expected life of the new development, and which was 100 to 150 years. And I guess I'm just, could you go into a little bit more detail about that? Maybe, like, I wonder what the Brownstone Terrace developers would have said in 1985, the expected life of their building is. And just thinking about the embedded energy and carbon in large structures like this, wanting to make sure that we're maximizing the chances that this is around for a long time. So if you could speak a little bit more about the materials used or just that expectation generally and how you came to that number, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk maybe a little bit about the existing buildings and then turn it over to Jack to talk about building materials. But the existing brownstone terrace buildings, I mean, these are stick frame structures with vinyl siding and kind of traditional, call it roofing materials that, need to be replaced periodically. I think the lack of longevity for that project is in part because of the chosen building materials. Frankly, it's just, these are very different building types. And I think that's a big part of kind of the delta between those two numbers. Jack, maybe if you want to talk a little bit about some of the materials we're planning to use here and kind of how they last.
Well, I think the first thing is it's a commercial building. It's commercially constructed with commercial building materials that relate to long-term maintenance, very little shrinkage. Even though it's got a wood structural frame, the type of wood frame that we do today has very compressed sills, so there's very little shrinkage. And the exterior materials are all cement fiberboard, so they're a non-wood product. It simulates wood in its patterning, but it is a non-shrinking, non-deteriorating, a solid cementitious fiberboard system. And then all of the copings and trim are metal. All of the masonry is brick. The entire exterior of the building has a water membrane system on it that's very, very sophisticated. And, water and gravity are the two biggest enemies for longevity. If you look at any building that's old and you see a lot of cracks, then it's because the footings and foundations have settled. And once that starts to happen, then the building begins to deteriorate with water infiltration, whatever. So this is a commercially engineered footing and foundation system. And the owner spends considerable amount of engineering time to make sure that the site preparation and footings and foundations are very, very, very sound. So like any long-standing building, whether it's 50 years or 250 years, it's all about how stable and how solid the foundation is and the materials and how good the roofing and waterproofing is. And all of that, I think, is the huge part of why we can get buildings to last 100 years today rather than 30 or less.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Other questions from committee members? Yes, Councilmember Rosenberger.
Thank you. Thanks for that presentation. I think there are some really exciting aspects of this project that I really appreciate. I really like all the bike parking and that it's going to be in the parking garage, most of it, so that it's covered. That's really awesome, I would say. I want to talk a little bit about the balconies on the south side. And just maybe if you all could explain that conversation with the neighborhood and why folks didn't want those balconies. And I know you said in your answers you could consider dispersing balconies to all sides of the building. I just know that south side is a good side because it gets the most sun, so it might be the place people would really actually spend time out there. So just curious.
Yeah, we had originally, kind of go back to early concept plans, contemplated balconies on the south side of the building, and I certainly agree with your point about sun and light. And we had 2 community meetings, as you probably are aware, and at those meetings, there was kind of consistent concerns from a number of parties regarding kind of noise and call it activity permeating beyond the railroad tracks. And we kind of took that to mean as a takeaway that moving balconies on the south facade was kind of the direction that we needed to go. I think I said in my comments, we're open to reevaluating kind of how we disperse them around the building. I think obviously not necessarily putting them between the buildings, but on the outward facing facades, I think that's something we can consider.
Thank you. Are these just like relatively small balconies? I'm just picturing like a room for, like 2 chairs and a tiny table type thing.
Jack can give you the dimensions, but in general, our products deliver 4 to 5 foot in depth balconies. Jack, do you have to know what exactly we've got on this project?
Well, it varies. The balconies at the chamfered corner at Dunn and 14th are about 12 feet long, but a typical balcony is like 4 by 8.
Okay, thanks. I wouldn't mind at some point maybe hearing from the committee members. I think it might be a small thing, but just like the south side really is like the best side to get some sun on your face. So just could chat more about it, I think.
All right. Other questions from committee members? Councilmember Volin.
Yes, thank you. I'm not sure who to address this question to, but maybe I'll start with Mr. Grillick. The CDG project up on North Walnut is comparable to this, and they were required to put in an actual public transit line that's going to run right past this project. Was there any discussion at all about this project contributing to the funding of that line, since it's going to be going right past this building?
No, we did not discuss with this petitioner about committing to funding another petition site's obligation.
That's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm suggesting is that in the same way that the other site is funding a bus to the tune of $140,000 a year in perpetuity, this project is actually bigger than that project. Why is there no comparable commitment to public transit?
Because this is coming in by right. That was a rezoning to a planned unit development, so there was more discretion in terms of what could be looked at and evaluated. This is coming in by right, so that was not really something that was on the table.
Can you see my frustration at the notion of mixed-use student housing? If this is now a by right type, we can't. Just a comment. I'll save it for later. I've got more ideas, but I'll reserve them for the moment. Thank you.
All right. I'll take a turn. Mr. Singh mentioned that there are one of the slides that Mr. Singh had in his presentation. He mentioned that there would be a unit offered to local police. Could you describe that, please?
Sure. So maybe a good parallel would be here at the Market in Athens. We do typically offer, especially on projects of this kind of size, a local policeman to kind of live on premise, and it's free of charge. But obviously that has certain security benefits that I think we enjoy and appreciate on our properties.
So you would offer this free of charge to a member of the local police department or sheriff's department or specifically police, or does it matter?
I think I'm happy to take direction on that if you'd prefer it be one or the other.
The city police department.
Yeah,
Oh.
I think we in the city
Let's
would prefer.
not kid around.
Yeah. So has this been shown in other developments to be a security benefit to you?
Yes. I think just the presence alone is a deterrence, so to speak. And I think you guys as a city council probably know a lot more about that than I do, but I think this has been an effective tool in kind of our toolbox to manage, crime and our, residents' behavior.
And is that dependent on that police officer having a car that they would park in your parking lot?
It's not dependent on it, but we do provide parking for the police officer as well.
Okay, because we're kind of in negotiations right now as to allowing take-home cars. So nice to know that that's not a condition of allowing the police person to live there. Is that right? Did I interpret that right?
You heard me correctly. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's pretty neat. Thank you. Second round of questions. Councilmember Volan.
Yes, Mr. Stang, I see one answer to one of the written questions submitted to you was that you estimate demand for parking to be roughly 65% of your total bed count. How did you come up with that estimate?
Yeah, so I think this has come up in kind of our community meeting as well in terms of how we sized our parking here, and I think Evolve is probably the most comparable property in terms of renter demographic. And that property has, as you probably know, a fair amount of parking, and kind of based on what we call a utilization rate, which is the total number of parking spaces is and how many of them are rented, divided by the number of beds in that project, is kind of how we estimate demand here.
How do you price your parking? I'm not so much interested as how much you supply as how much you regulate demand. How do you price your parking?
Yep. So we typically go with, what a standard structured parking place cost or charge is in a city that we develop. And so, we're doing that similarly here. And and I know this is a concern of yours, but it is not kind of given away. It's not tied to, anything from a leasing perspective. It's something that a resident, they come in, they rent a unit. If they want parking, they also rent a space.
Right. Well, I guess what I'm saying is if you have demand if you've got 65% of your project parked, but you've got demand for more than that, what do you do?
I think in general, we try to not end up in a situation where there's substantial demand beyond what we've programmed. And I think the reason for that is that it can significantly impact our ability to rent units. That said, it is free market economics, and if the market as a whole supports a higher price point, then I imagine our project would as well.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions for the petitioner or for staff? Councilmember Flaherty.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a little bit more about the National Green Building Standard that was mentioned in the materials. That in particular the petitioner plans to meet silver level standards for that, which I'll also just note does match actually what's within the sustainability incentives chapter of the Unified Development Ordinance. Silver level National Green Building Standards. So I was wondering, but I'll also note that the Environmental Commission in its brief memo sort of encouraged the petitioner to shoot for a higher standard like gold or emerald. And I guess my questions are, first, is it just that the petitioner plans to meet the silver certification standard, or does the petitioner actually plan to get certified by the National Green Building Council?
Yeah.
Okay, and the second was, if you could just talk to me a little bit about, I don't have a good sense. I did a little bit of initial Googling, but it's hard to find a ton of detail on like the cost impact of these different standards for and meeting them. So if you have a sense just from other projects that you've worked on over time of kind of what type of difference we're talking about between bronze, silver, gold, and emerald in terms of either in an absolute figure for a project this size, or like an absolute dollar figure, or in a sort of percent of project amount. I'd just be curious to know a little bit more. So sorry, 2 questions.
Sure. So can you remind me of your first question again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, the first one was just, do you plan to get certified, or is it just meeting those standards?
Yeah, so I think meeting the standards is kind of our goal here. That said, getting certified with National Green Building Standards is not kind of overly burdensome. So I mean, if that's something that you feel is important, I think we'd be certainly willing to do that. Your second question related to kind of general costs as you escalate throughout, the building standards within NGBS. Those they can escalate fairly quickly, and it's not a linear curve. It's not, I think bronze in general is a very kind of low bar with kind of minimal or limited cost impacts. I think silver has some more substantial cost impacts, and I think by the time you get to emerald, there's sometimes even a question of whether it's even possible to feasibly implement it, especially in multifamily projects. So, to give you percentages, I don't actually know them off the top of my head. I do know that gold in particular is very financially impactful.
Thank you.
I'd like to just follow up on that question. So the silver standard certification, you would be willing to have the actual certification done?
Yeah, we've done that on other projects. It's something we're comfortable with.
Yeah, I would highly encourage that, because that was a question I had when I was reading your proposal, was like, how are we going to know that it really checked off all those boxes?
Yeah.
So that's great. I wanted to also ask whether Mr. Borman or another architect you'll work with is LEED certified or otherwise certified in green building?
I'll let Jack answer that.
Yes, well, our staff has, between the designers and the project managers and myself, numerous projects that have been LEED certified, green, the National Multi-Housing Green Standard. There's a lot of different types of standards around the country, and we're very familiar with them and embrace their application and have gone fully through certification for LEED projects as well. So.
Okay, great. Other questions? Councilmember Volin?
Yeah, I'd like to get a sense from the petitioners and from planning how we define the term mixed use in mixed use student housing. Is there mixed use in this project? And if so, what is it that's mixed use about it? What I see is an apartment building.
Yeah, so the mixed use student housing district, and that's the same nomenclature with all of the commercial districts, just implies that there are a mix of uses that are allowed. There's not a certain requirement that you have a mixed use project or a certain amount of commercial space. It just simply designates that a mix of uses are allowed within this district.
Thank you.
And again, I want to follow up on a colleague's questions. I thought that there was some mention in the statement about potential small commercial use at the corner of 14th and Dunn. Is that right?
Yeah, I can take that question. So we have studied that option, and I think it's something that we are willing to do. I think some of this was just trying to understand kind of what the needs are of the council and kind of what we could do to help provide for that. So I think to answer your question as well, I think that's that's something we're comfortable doing.
Yeah, I think we're all very interested in that. And I think it would be a good location because there's so much student residential around there. Some student geared snack bar or something would be great.
Yeah.
Councilmember Volin, did you want to follow up as well?
I did. Mr. Stang, is there any plan to put a commercial hood anywhere within the complex so that a
Commercial.
restaurant could locate there?
You mean in terms of ventilation?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've studied both grease traps and ventilation as a concept, including to include within that retail space. I think it's something that we could accommodate.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions before we go to the public? All right, seeing none, we'll go to the public, and we can also come back for more questions if you think of them after the public comment period. And Mr. Lucas is monitoring the chat, so if you want to speak, please raise your hand in Zoom or put a note in the chat to the council meeting host. Mr. Lucas, who do we have?
Yes, first up we have, I'm not sure if it's I am Rima or EM Rima, but she is now unmuted and ready to comment.
Hi, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, please give your full name and then go ahead.
All right, my name is Rima Montoya, and I'm a Bloomington resident. I came on the Zoom because I'm concerned about what is happening in Bloomington. And as I saw the presentation and the apartment building, my concern is that I'm wondering if there was I don't see any beauty to this building, for one, and I don't know how it enhances Bloomington. Architecturally, it seems like just one big monster right in the middle of Bloomington, completely out of place with the rest of Bloomington's charm. So this is my comment. I would like to know what other residents in Bloomington feel about this. Also, it seems that this is pretty much just profit driven. There's no sign of beauty or health or how it invites living harmoniously with the environment, trees, nature. I don't see much green space around this. And I would like to know if that was even taken into account or consideration in the architecture. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to comment on the proposed rezone of the Brownstone Terrace property?
Yes, next up we have Lisa Podulka, who should now be unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Great. Yeah, so I have a couple questions about the new development. And first of all, I apologize, I was doing other things throughout the beginning part of the meeting. So if some of this is in the agenda packet, I didn't have a chance to read that. But these are kind of broad questions. And I'm also not sure if you're allowed to respond directly to comments right now or questions, but I understand either way. But I'd love to hear answers if that is part of this period. I'm wondering, one, what the general financial range for this new housing is, with the terraces and stuff that kind of, to my mind looks a little bit more high end, but it was mentioned to be mixed use student housing. And I know we're definitely in need of some, lower income student housing in Bloomington. That's always been a struggle for a lot of folks, I think. So I was curious about the potential price range of these apartments. I know there's a lot of factors and that you can't give me a definite answer, but even just a ballpark would be great. And then secondly, I was wondering, what is the time scale of this development? Is this more a proposition for the future at some point, or is there an actual date that you're planning to get started on this? Mainly on my mind was COVID and just how difficult, the housing situation is for everyone. And I guess I was hoping that hopefully when development does begin, if it does begin, that it would happen just after COVID, because it's really hard to switch housing in the middle of a pandemic. So just two quick questions.
All right, thank you very much. We will ask those after the public comment and get some responses for you from the petitioners. Would anybody else like to comment on the Brownstone Terrace rezone proposal? Final call for public comments. All right. Well, let's go back to the committee members. And I would like to follow up on some of the things that we heard from the two members of the public. First, I'd like to ask both staff and the petitioner what the green space requirements are for the mixed-use student housing district and whether the preliminary plans meet those requirements.
I can address that question, Aaron. For the MS district, the requirement is 30% landscape area, and the plan that's shown here does meet that 30% landscape. And a big change in the new ordinance is pervious surfaces are no longer allowed in landscape, so it has to be, you know, landscaping, grass, that kind of thing, and we do meet that.
And do you know if that is different, more or less green space than is on that site currently?
I believe it is more. I would need to check and run the numbers, but I can get that to you.
Mr. Groylik, do you know?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again? I was looking up something.
Oh, is the 30% green space coverage, which is required by the mixed-use student zoning, is that more or less compared with how much green space there is currently on that property?
That I could not answer. I would just looking at the aerial, I'd be willing to bet that 30% is less. I bet that what's on the site now is more than that 30%, but that's just a guess by looking at the aerial photograph.
Okay, so that's something to keep an eye on. I think we don't want to decrease green space here. And then I wanted to ask about, so there was a question about the price range. Is it, I know it's going to be a ballpark figure at this point, but that led me to the affordable housing component, which is in the petitioner statement, but we haven't mentioned it yet. So maybe Aaron could speak to both of those.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I think as far as the market rate units themselves, you know, those are kind of in line with the standard market, which, you know, I think we see throughout the city for newer products. And as to the affordable, which is kind of to give you the range, you know, I think everyone on the call is familiar with the affordability agreement that we've signed for this project. And you know, it provides for 148 affordable units on site, you know, and interspersed throughout the building. I think we feel very good about that. And obviously the rents for those units are kind of tied to AMI percentages and thresholds. And, you know, but they can be as low as kind of the low 400s. So, I mean, it's on a per bed basis. So it's very cheap.
And it's, so just to understand, it's the affordable housing, the 148 units is to be affordable for people who make 120% of area median income. And
yeah, and I think I answered that in, it's a little more complicated than that, but it's a mix of kind of two different thresholds because you have workforce housing, and then you also have affordable housing, and they're sort of defined slightly differently. But you did answer, I believe, the workforce version or iteration.
I thought it was all workforce. What I read was it's all for 120% AMI.
No, that's not correct.
Okay, so there is some that's going to be affordable for people who make less money than that?
That's correct.
Well, that's great. I'll have to look at that again. Councilmember Vol, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. So just to kind of give you a little bit of a little more color on that, the workforce housing, which is the 120% hurdle, their rates are set by as a means of equal to 25% of the adjusted AMI at the time of the lease, whereas it's obviously lower than that.
Can you tell us how many of the 148 units are going to be for workforce and how many will be for?
Yeah, if you give me 1 second here, I will double check that. So it's affordable is roughly, as a percentage of beds, 2/3 affordable and 1/3 workforce.
And was the 148 units or beds?
That was units.
Okay. All right, thank you. I'm going to stop monopolizing things now and go to Councilmember Boland.
How many beds?
161.
Okay. I was going to ask how many people will be employed by this project?
I don't have that answer off the top of my head, but I'm happy to get back to you.
Well, I guess what I'm really getting at is what's required to manage, how many total bedrooms here? 1,100 to 1080?
A little less than that, 1070.
Yeah. So, I mean, how much staff do you require to manage a building with that many units in it?
Yeah. Again, I'll have to defer. I don't know off the top of my head, but I would imagine it's somewhere in the 10 to 20 range.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Rosenberger.
I just have a quick follow-up on that. Thank you. I'm sorry, there's a lot of numbers right there. Did you say 148 units and then 161 bedrooms?
That's correct.
So these are almost all 1-bedroom units that will be affordable.
A lot of 1-bedroom units, which from an affordability demand perspective, we think is probably fitting.
Okay. Yep, thanks.
Councilmember Flaherty.
Thanks. More just confirming numbers, because I don't think I had seen that specific total number in the packet. The total number of units anticipated in the building I had listed as 440. So the 148 you mentioned puts it at 33%, a little over 33%, or 1/3 of the total units in the building are designated for affordable of some kind. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's great.
All right, are there any other questions? From committee members? All right, seeing none, we will move to committee member comments. And if you have in mind any reasonable conditions you might want to place upon this rezone, then try to formulate those, and if not, that's fine too. So who would like to go first with their comments about the proposal? Councilmember Rosenberger.
Oh, thank you. I was muted. So for me, I assume we're going to do a do-pass recommendation this evening, and I think this looks good, and I really appreciate a lot that you all are bringing to this project. I think the 1/3 of the units being designated affordable is really exciting. I also really like all the bike parking you're putting in, and that it's as nice as the car parking. That's really appreciated. I like that just some of your answers to the questions that you will consider looking into compost. I think composting is great to divert a lot from landfill and can potentially save money from dumpsters. I think I would be up for you all just like reconsidering the balconies. I don't really want to make folks mad, but I love sunshine, and I love sunshine in my home. So I think, taking that off of the side of the building that gets the most sun isn't advantageous, I think. And there's small balconies. I can't imagine parties happening on balconies where only 3 people can fit. So just something I urge you maybe to reconsider if you're up for it. Honestly, I think that's about it. I like the considerations you've put into place here. I hope eventually something with Bloomington Transit can happen. Just that, I understand where we are redoing our route. So I hope at some point maybe BT will put a route back down that road. But I like that you can get to a grocery store directly on that one route on Walnut. That's great. People can walk to campus. So looking good to me. So thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to go next? Councilmember Volan.
Yeah, I have to say that I'm on the other end from Councilmember Rosenberger. I do not see the point of rezoning a property when there's a property with 750 beds, which when it was approved up on the Motel 6 site last year was the largest single project ever approved. Again, they're funding an entire new bus route to the tune of $130,000 or so a year in perpetuity. And that's because it was a PUD and they, that was one of the things they needed to do. This is a bigger building. It's going to be on the same route. It doesn't need to fund its own bus. It should be funding that new bus. The project out at Crescent Bend is going to be funding a bus route. This is the result of the PUD process. So this is why I always oppose the student housing zoning process, because now there's no leverage. Well, that's too bad. But here is a project that's going to be by far the biggest project built in the city, over 1,000 bedrooms. And they're not only not considering public transit, but they're building 65% parking. I don't know if they visited the site at Evolve, but they were significantly underparked for what they built, which is something like 80%. That much parking is not that needed. We have electric scooters now, electric bikes, everybody's using them. There's a whole lot less demand for cars, but none of that matters if it's not priced to limit demand. If, as the developer says, they're meeting renter needs, that's not managing supply. That's not managing demand. That's providing supply. So I can't support this, even though there's a lot of good things about it. It's not good enough. But this is really more an indictment of the new zoning type altogether. It implies that it's mixed use when that's a misleading term. Student housing is inherently what's the word, segregatory. It's not illegal to do that because students are in a protected class, but effectively it's saying let's pen them into this corner of town. But most importantly, if the developer wanted to make the same commitment, it should be proportionately higher than what CDG is providing or Crescent Bend, but or Chandler's Glen, up 17th and the highway. But if they wanted to make that commitment, I would wholeheartedly support the project. The public transit, as far as I'm concerned, is everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Flaherty.
Sure, thank you. Thanks again to members of the public and staff and Petitioner for questions and presentation tonight. I'm also ready to vote on a do pass recommendation this evening if a majority of the committee or the chair, I guess, I'm not sure how we actually decide whatever we go forward. I'm also happy to wait if Councilmember Volan thinks that's would help him in some way. I'm also in support of this project, and I must say I think I just disagree with Councilmember Volan about like how I'm thinking about this. The UDO zoning map proposed map is released. It has this area designated as the mixed-use student zoning district. We had something kind of similar to this when we heard a PUD at the beginning of this year, actually, that was looking to essentially match what would almost certainly be their future zoning district. To me, this is asking for us to speed up the process 6 months from what it might otherwise be to rezone this property to what it is almost certainly going to be anyway. So it's not a huge difference for us to approve this now versus to wait 6 months unless somehow the mixed-use zoning district is eliminated or something, which I think is highly unlikely. Also, our comprehensive plan actually says that we should get away from planned unit developments. They're a nightmare for ongoing maintenance of zoning standards and updates and that sort of thing. So I think the idea of the UDO update generally was to create better standards and better zones, and then let builders and developers follow those standards, as opposed to having all these sort of piecemeal planned unit developments. So the fact that this is likely the zoning district that Petitioner will be facing in the near future anyway, and that they have really done such an outstanding job at meeting various incentives that we have in our UDO, I think is really almost extraordinary, and I applaud them for that. I mean, 1/3 of units earmarked for affordable, as well as meeting what again is our sustainability incentive standard on page 217 of the UDO. They're meeting standards they wouldn't have to if they built by right, in order to do this now and just through negotiations with the city. And I think that's really significant and it shouldn't be minimized. So I guess I just think a little bit differently about maybe the nature and use, the optimal nature and use of PUDs, which leads me to a different perspective. Finally, just a couple of minimal things. Regarding points of sustainability and sort of green space, it's tricky. Of course, a park is great, but denser living also allows us to stem the tide of sprawl and people living far out at the edges of town and drive commuting and parking in the stadium lot. This will house over 1,000 people as opposed to what's there now, which houses 232 people. So we're talking about another almost something like 800 people who are going to live in a walkable area. The climate impacts of that are a major, major benefit. If we're looking at the whole system where these people would live otherwise, then it's actually quite a green improvement, even if the individual parcel isn't covered in green space. That's the same is true for affordability. We know we have high housing demand. We are a growing community. When you allow another 800 people to live here, let's say they are mostly students, that relieves pressure on other neighborhoods and other buildings where those students are currently living. So I think those are all good things and part of the whole systems level we need to be thinking about. Final points. If Petitioner is comfortable with it, I would like to see them commit to actually certifying the National Green Building Silver Standard. I think that can be good marketing for residents, hopefully, too. Let them know their utility bills will be less than they could be otherwise. And I think same regarding including a grease trap or whatever ventilation is needed for a commercial kitchen if that is not prohibitive for the petitioner. I think it's a nice thing to include and helps preserve some flexibility in future uses for the commercial space. And then finally, I share Councilmember Rosenberger's perspective on the balconies. I understand, I guess, that folks who already live on 12th Street just don't want the potential for noise or something. But it's sort of just a first arrival problem. I think everybody deserves access to the outdoors. And it's really quite a distance away. I actually hopped into Google Maps and measured from the back of where this building will be, of the proposed buildings, the south side balconies. It's about 230 to 270 feet on average between where those balconies would be and where the typical house on 12th Street is, with the railroad corridor in between. So I think it's not unreasonable to include balcony access for folks on the south side of the building, in particular because a lot of the south side units were labeled as the affordable units on the architectural plans. So that's something I would prefer to see as well. And I think that is all of my comments. Thank you. And thanks again for all your work getting it to this point.
All right. Well, we have 5 minutes left before the next committee is supposed to start meeting, so I'll be quick. I also am supportive of the project, and I think it has some great features. The affordable housing component is really impressive. I think you may have noticed that we actually did not have that in front of us, so I would like to see that documentation before the full council votes next week. I hope there's a record of this meeting that is presented to the Plan Commission when the site plan comes forward, because that site plan won't come to us. And so I would like to to really urge the petitioner to really have a mixed use component, meaning something other than housing, a commercial component on Dunn Street is, as they said, is probably the most realistic. I also want to see the green building certification at the minimum of silver level, the National Green Building Council. I think it should be certified to, verify that those energy efficiencies and other aspects have been met. And just to reiterate about the security aspect, I think it's great to offer a unit to a police officer, and that should be a Bloomington police officer and not a sheriff's officer. So I don't know if my colleagues, I've heard a few people say they want the certification definitely to be a part of it. So that might be a condition that we bring forward, for the meeting next week. But at this point, I would consider a motion for a move do pass. Councilmember Volan, you had something to add?
I wanted to follow up with a brief comment. My objection is not necessarily a conflict with free market capitalism. If the petitioners wanted to reduce their parking to 0.5, that would be a big plus. That 160 or so parking spaces could be made into more units. I would totally support that. I mean, units are higher margin than parking spaces anyway. But you get what you would. I mean, if you assume that people want, if you don't set the price to the point where you'll get demand of 0.5, you're not going to see that. You're going to see if you price it too low, people will demand more parking. So I would love to be surprised by a commitment to public transit. I don't expect that, I do think that the parking can be reduced in exchange for more housing, and I would totally support it if the petitioner was interested in that. With that, never mind. That's it for me. I don't have a recommendation for a motion.
So whatever motion is made first is what we'll vote on. We can either continue this to another hearing in January or send it back to the full council next week. So I'm all ears.
I'll move do pass recommendation.
We'll need a second.
I'll second.
All right. So there's been a motion and a second to send this back to the full council next week. And I'll just name the committee members and you can tell me how you vote. Councilmember Flaherty, did you have a question first?
I just wondered if the motion was debatable or if any council members had comment on the motion. Is that in order?
Well, seeing as it's 7:29, I would discourage that at this time, unless there's an urgent comment that needs to, is relevant to this.
Sure. I just wanted to hear from Councilmember Volan in particular, since he expressed some reservation. But
Councilmember Volan, do you want to comment on the motion on the table?
I'm really at a loss. I frankly, we need some time to hear from, if we could take 2 minutes to speak to the developer to see what he'd be interested in doing, I just don't know. It's an awkward schedule, awkward time of year. We're going to be continuing a month from now. I'm really ambivalent. If there's going to be a substantial change, it's worth waiting, but I'm not expecting that. I'd like to hear the developer's opinion.
On what in particular?
On everything we've said.
Oh my goodness, it's 7:30. I really don't want to hold up the next committee that's supposed to meet at this time.
Then I would recommend that we continue.
Okay, but there's a motion on the table. So the motion is for a do pass recommendation to return this to the council next week. So Councilmember Rosenberger?
Yes.
Councilmember Flaherty?
Yes.
Councilmember Volan?
No.
And I will vote yes. So we will return this to the council with a positive recommendation of 3-1. But I do encourage, conversations to continue with the petitioner and the staff in the coming week if there are concerns that perhaps the petitioner can't address and is willing to address. And of course, we can add reasonable conditions that can be presented next week to the full council. All right. Well, thank you all very much for your time this evening, and we will see you next week.